GST, the framework of GST. Okay. So, prior to GST, there was, various taxes in India. And, I have been dealing with all these, authorities in my life. I have worked in various companies where I have, most of my, job was to attend all these authorities, income tax, sales tax, service tax, excise department. So, there were, two kinds of, acts basically. One was, levied by central, the central government. They were collecting taxes. Central and state government, they collect taxes. They have got the mandate from the constitution. So we had, service tax, which is not there now, which has been replaced by GST. Everything is passed now. Then there was a central sales tax when the goods are moving from one state to another. So there was a 10% tax or 4% if you submitted a C form. Then there was an excise duty on manufacture. When you make a sale, there was a sales tax. When you were providing services, there was service tax. Then there was a custom duty, which is still there. Then, there was SAD and CVD. These are called countervailing duty and special additional duty. In India, if any goods were produced, they were subject to excise duty prior to GST. And still there is excise duty on petroleum products. So first you have to pay excise duty on manufacture. When you sell, you have to pay the sales tax. Okay, that is a state subject which will be coming in my second part. Okay, so so to counterbalance, anybody to have a level playing field among all the industry participants. So it was decided at the time by the government that anything which is imported from outside, there will be two additional taxes which will be levied. One was called the CVD, countervailing duty, which is equivalent of excise duty in India. So if you are importing something, you have to pay, don't have to pay excise duty, but you have to pay CVD, which is equivalent of excise duty. So that, anybody is selling in India from importing goods from outside, he also suffers an excise duty. So that means he is at par with the Indian manufacturer. Okay. Similarly, SAD, which was, to counterbalance the sales tax. So these two levies, they still exist now, but in different format, in GST format. So that's why it's better to understand these things. Okay. So CVD is called countervailing duty and SAD is called special additional duty. And still on petrol, we have SAD. Okay. It's called windfall tax now. Then we have, state levy, where we had, entry tax, VAT, which was earlier called the Local Sales Tax Act, which was now changed to VAT, value added tax. Then we had octroi and then purchase tax. So within the state, if the goods are moving from one place to another, there was a purchase tax, there was there was octroi, there was local sales tax, there was entry tax. Okay, so there were so many taxes in India. So and it was making life of the people miserable. Yeah. That if you are importing things from abroad, then because it has not been manufactured in India, so there is no excise duty on that. Excise duty they might have paid if they was there in their country. So when you are importing, so the goods will be subject to an excise duty, indirect excise duty through CVD. No, it is not excise duty. It's a custom levy. It was a custom levy levied by Government of India to make level playing field for everyone. Suppose, if I am importing something from abroad, the same thing is available in India. So if Indian guy is manufacturing, he was supposed to pay excise duty prior to GST. Okay. So, if I imported something from outside, it will not have any excise duty on it. Okay. Fine. So there was some kind of levy which was levied on imported goods which are equivalent to the Indian excise duty. Okay. So that the good becomes competitive in India, whether you are buying from abroad or buying from India, to make everything at par. अगर आप बाहर से मंगाओगे तो एक्साइज ड्यूटी नहीं लगनी तो वो सस्ता पड़ेगा. So just to make it at par, Government of India introduced CVD. Okay. हाँ. नहीं एक्साइज ड्यूटी अवॉइड नहीं करें, कस्टम ड्यूटी अवॉइड करें. कस्टम ड्यूटी. ओके, जस्ट होल्ड ऑन दैट. इसको कर लेते हैं और बाद में क्वेश्चन पूछना आप जब इसके हो जाएंगे. आई नो दीज क्वेश्चंस आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, but let's understand the subject. If you are not understanding anything out of it, please ask me. Okay. But if you go in some incident, definitely we'll go. You are right. Absolutely. No, that was custom duty. You can ask questions, no doubt. I mean, they are relevant. But I'm just saying कि इसको हम इसको थोड़ा सा मतलब इसी पे questions पूछो आप अगर है. Okay. So these were the various, these are something which has gone now, okay, which has become irrelevant now. Okay, this is just to give you some information that this was the law which existed. So there were so many, authorities which were, excise authorities, income tax authorities, sales tax authorities. So there were so many, the bureaucrats who were handling all the matters, and you have to deal with them. Okay, and we know how corrupt was all these institutions. Uh, I remember, I had to, we had fixed up a monthly with, most of the guys here in the excise department. So we had to pay them some money so that they don't, hold our trucks, allow us a freedom to do our business. So अब कम हो गया. I don't know होता होगा, but बहुत कम हो गया. Maybe something which is still subject to all these things which are not out of GST में भी कम हो गया. GST में नहीं है. अभी from 100 it has become only 10 or 5. Okay, fine. Since I am not dealing now on a daily basis to these authorities, so but I am of the view कि अभी नहीं हो रहा है. Okay, fine. So this one again to visit. So there was an excise duty earlier, which was taxable event was manufacture. If you manufacture something, there is an excise duty. Service tax, if you are providing services like lawyer service or telecom services, you are paying, or using mobile services, so you are supposed to pay 12% or something like GST on it, or 18%. Then sales tax, VAT, and CST. So these are all one form. So this taxable event for sales. So if you make a sale, you have to pay either CST or local tax or VAT, whatever form they existed. Then we had custom duty. Customs duty is still there. That has not been replaced. So taxable event is when you are importing or exporting. But there are always a component of CVD and SED which are linked to excise duty and sales tax. So we'll see what has happened to them. Then anti-tax, entertainment tax. So this was, the event was, they have become all part of now GST. Okay. So this was the past. Okay. Now, custom duty is there. Only custom duty remains. Custom duty के दो भाग जो हैं CVD, SAD, they still remain, but they have become IGST now. हाँ जी. CST was when you are, selling goods from Maharashtra to say Delhi. So interstate movement, there was you have to pay sales tax. And if the goods are being sold from one and within the state from one place to say from Jaipur to say Bikaner, then it was the VAT. When the goods are moving from say Jaipur to Delhi, then there was a CST. Okay, fine. Okay, so the system was very complex system. So many laws. Okay, and I remember when I was working with a company, I had about 15 crore rupees matter which are pending with various authorities at the time, and I was dealing with all that authority, whether it was sales tax or excise duty. There's a lot of show cause notices which are being issued to us, and I was used to go to those authorities to resolve those issues. Okay. Then there was a tax cascading impact. Like you first pay excise duty, then the goods are sold. So that means 100 rupees goods are made. You pay 10 rupees or 20 rupees excise duty, so it becomes 120. On 120, you pay another 15 rupees as tax, sales tax. So there was a cascading tax on tax impact which was coming. Okay, in the old systems. Of course, they tried to address that in earlier regime, but it was not fully applicable. Okay, high compliance cost. Okay, so that was the this thing. Then inefficiency in tax administration, because there were so many bureaucrats, so many people, so many officers, so they had their own understanding about the law, and most of them were not aware of the full law. Okay, so they used to issue us notices, and then we used to go to the courts or tribunals and get relief from them. Okay, so they will have their own interpretations. Okay, then lack of uniformity in provisions and rates. So sometimes they say that you have to pay 4%. We were paying 4%. They said the rate is 8% for you. Okay, so those kinds of disputes which are existing that time. So now we come to the GST framework. Okay, a simplified tax structure, minimum tax rates. Okay, of course, still we have a lot of tax rates, but we can't do without that, because in say in Europe and all, there may be 2 taxes or 3 taxes, but we can't tax like a Mercedes as well as a small item at the same tax rate in India because of our past this thing, and so much of people with so many income status, we still have to have some kind of a multiple rates. So we'll talk about that. Integration of prevailing indirect to ensure uniformity. So all the taxes were supposed to be integrated now. All the acts which I've shown, they became one, barring the custom duty. Then credit available across all goods, which means whatever tax you pay, you will get a credit at a by other one. So ultimately, the tax has to be borne by ultimate consumer. Nobody in the chain bears that cost. Ultimately, when the goods comes to the hands of the ultimate consumer, he bears the tax. So whatever tax are paid through a value chain, they become just pass-throughs. Okay, one person passes to another, other person passes to the third guy. Suppose it is going passing say five or six hands. So everybody paying a tax. The other guy is claiming that tax which he has paid from his ultimate sale. Okay, so we'll have some examples to show that. Okay, so so this was the best part of it, that we have credit available across all goods and services. Okay, availability of credit even for interstate procurement. So earlier the central sales tax, which was when the goods were moving from one state to another, there was no credit available. So now under the GST, everything is falling under the same credit system. So all the taxes are just passed through. Ultimately, the consumer is bearing the tax. No one else bears the tax. Okay, fine. Preventing cascading of taxes. So same thing. Okay. Then wider tax bracket base leading to increased tax collections. So which means now it's become huge base. So government is trying to get more taxes from so many people rather than some people evading excise duty, somebody evading sales tax, interpretation, somebody is paying 4%, but actually available applicable tax is 8%. So there were a lot of disputes. So the government said that if you have one system, it will ensure good collection and with a wider tax base. Simplified compliances leading to ease of business. So objective at that time was that ultimately it will help to ease business. Now how far it has achieved, that remains to be seen, because still, because the state governments have lost their power now to tax. Okay, earlier all the state government had all the powers to tax whatever rates they wanted. So that power has been taken. Now their group is still part of the GST council. Okay, so so that simplification has not happened because everybody has a fear that they'll be losing revenue. Still, petrol and diesel are out of the GST because almost like 30 to 40% of the revenue of the state comes from petrol and diesel taxation. So that major chunk is still outside the GST. Okay. Liquor. Yeah, liquor also, alcohol. Okay. So diesel, petrol, and all other petroleum products plus the alcohol, they are outside the GST bracket. Because of that, still there is that credit is not available. So anybody's product is not GST. Like anybody who is selling petrol, he has to pay excise duty. So that whatever excise duty he has paid becomes a cost for him. Okay, for the intermediate manufacturer. So that is the lacuna now. So that chain is broken. The credit chain gets broken if something is not. If your final product is applicable for GST, then only you get all the credit. If your final product is subject to excise duty, then you can't get the credit for that. So anybody who is manufacturing alcohol or say petroleum products, they are not allowed that credit. Okay, so the cost goes up for them. Okay. Then why GST? Simplified tax structure, no, tax cascading, credit fungibility, because the credits can be availed and ultimately the consumer pays the tax. Rest, yeah. Sure. अभी एक इसको खत्म करने का then I'll say ask question. Okay. Then focus on business. Now people can just focus on business rather than focusing on how to manage taxes. My 100% time or my 90% of the time was basically to manage tax authorities. So, I used to get calls from head office. They say, I'm just gone to either I'm sitting with excise guy or income tax guy or, something. So most of the time was being spent with all those authorities. So my other job was to, even manage some part of the business because I was handling finance. So, so focus on business, and even the top people, when we will get a good demand of 5 crores, then everybody get involved, right from the CEO to the people down the line. So, they were focusing how to manage such kind of a show cause notice or any dispute which happens with the tax authority. So that at least that part has been taken care by the GST. Then, ease of doing business. Now, if you see, GST was implemented in 2017 and 18. Okay, fine. This is the graph which is showing how, on an average, monthly, how the revenue has been ramping on the GST collection. It started with, 82,000 crores average. This is monthly average. I'll show you. I've shared the figure here. I'll just show you the Excel sheet also, which tells you, how the collections happen. Right up to October, the figure is out. Okay, October, the money was how much money we collected? 1,72,000 crores. Okay, and this is the last is the average. Okay, so I have this is 2022-23 collections. Like this, the same number is available on your Google Drive, so you can just go through if you want how we have able to ramp up the revenue. So revenue has gone up from 82,000 to 1,66,000 crores on an average monthly in how many years? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Okay, and only 1 year there was a dip, which was 2020-21. Everybody know because of COVID, because there was a lockdown of most part of the year or 3 to 4 months. So the revenue collections had fallen. So otherwise, now it is improving. So this becomes, every time the revenue collections are announced, so we know that India is progressing because this is one figure which tells about our production, our manufacture, our services, everything. If this figure is rising, that means India is growing. Okay, fine. So this authenticates our numbers basically in terms of our growth numbers. Okay, you wanted to ask question, yeah?
So it will be possible for you on board just explain all the time the product is manufactured at the manufactured premises.
Yeah.
Let's say it's 100 rupees. From manufacturer goes to distributor.
हाँ
He puts a let's say a GST of 18%.
हाँ सर एक सेकंड ये आएगा भी. There are examples, plenty of examples I have put.
यहाँ से आप जैसे
बिल्कुल
बहुत सारे
बिल्कुल
कंज्यूमर तक
श्योर
बोला
हाँ
तो उसमें 100 का वो 120 हुआ कहीं पे 140 हुआ और
बिल्कुल
का स्वास्थ्य पे 200 रुपए का हो गया.
एब्सोल्यूट.
अब 200 रुपए की 18% पड़ रहा है और 100 रुपए के
Sir, I've got it. I have already inbuilt some illustrations in this my PPT. Okay, fine.
on the sidelines अगर आप जीएसटी फॉर्म भी कैसा होता है और
हाँ वो भी
कैसे
बताएंगे.
अप्लाई करना
GST returns, everything. GST at 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything has become now automatic, and there is something called e-way bill now. All the people who are selling goods, so they have to raise a bill using the GST portal. So it's become mandatory now from 1st of September. So we'll talk about that. 50,000 zero. So we'll talk about that also, and I'll show you. We have an association. There is an NRWA in society where I live. I am the secretary and treasurer. Earlier I was a treasurer. Now I'm the secretary, and I'll show you the data of that. How we collect money and how we claim the input credit, and I'll show you all the returns in a very simplified manner. Okay, and maybe I'll take you to the GST portal and show you, how you can browse through various reports there of any this thing. Okay, so GST is a comprehensive indirect tax on manufacture, sale and consumption of goods as well as service. So it's a comprehensive tax covering all things, whether it's a service or a manufacture or anything. Okay, it replaces all indirect taxes levied on goods and services by central government and state government. So now there is only one GST levied by the not by state or central, but one body which decides about the GST Council. Now, okay, so the goods and services tax has been replaced by all this arrows. Okay, it's become only goods. One nation, one tax, one market. Events are based on concept of supply. Now, instead of saying it's a manufacture, it's a service, we say it's a supply. So any supply happens, there is a GST. Whether the underlying transaction is manufacture or whatever it is, so it's called supply. Streamlining and cross utilization of input tax credits. So all the tax credits, at various chains are allowed. Revolutionary invoice matching concept. GST council there is. Okay, GST governing body with the power to take decisions on rates. So 33% power is with the union, 66% power with the state government. Okay, then GST on supply. GST is levied on supply of goods with effect from July 2017. This act came into existence. It is applicable to whole of India, including Jammu and Kashmir. Earlier, most of the acts were not applicable to Jammu and Kashmir. Now this act is also available entire India. Then I'm just going to now India we have dual GST. Okay, GST introduced in India is dual GST. Okay, so we'll understand what it is. The central government and state government will levy GST simultaneously on a common base, whether it is supply of goods or services or both. Many countries, I'm going to explain that. Many countries in the world have a single unified GST system. That's a single tax applicable throughout the country. But we have dual system. However, in federal states, countries like Brazil and Canada, a dual GST system is prevalent, whereby GST is levied by both the federal and the state provincial governments or the state or provincial governments. In India, the dual GST is introduced, whereby the a central goods and service tax, which is called CGST, and a state goods and service tax, which is called the SGST, it will be levied on taxable value of every transactions of supply of goods and services. Now, the word supply is used, the word manufacture or service, everything has been removed. So there are two kinds of taxes we have to pay. Okay, so GST as well as CGST. Now let's understand a little bit past and the current, how they have been now mixed. Intrastate supply. If the goods moved intrastate means within the state. Okay, then excise duty and service tax will be known as CGST. So whatever excise duty was collected in the state for manufacture and the service tax which was collected, it will become CGST. So that part is central levy. Okay, so this is a share of the central government, and local VAT, other taxes will be known as SGST. So we know that the state government revenue was VAT, central government revenue was excise and service. So now the revenue portion of the central government will be called CGST, and the revenue portion which state was getting will be called CGST, and the back of that is the VAT or the sales tax. Okay. Then the interstate taxable supply, when the goods are moving from one state to another, okay, then there was a CST which was applicable, central sales tax. It has been now integrated into one tax which is called IGST. When the goods are moving from one state to another, then their entire revenue will come to the central government by way of IGST. Of course, central government shares with the states later on. They share that revenue with the states. And approximately it will be total of CGST and SGST. So the rate will be same. Entire money will be going to the central government in form of IGST. So here basically CGST and GST are no separate. So one rate is IGST. Okay. Import from outside India, custom duty. Okay. Now in place of CVD and SAD, IGST will be charged. Okay. So because CVD is excise component and SAD is the sales tax component, which is the central one, basically if you say that, so that will become IGST now. Okay. So custom duty में आपको custom duty पे पढ़ना पड़ता है और IGST पे करना पड़ता है. Okay. When the goods are moving from one state to another, you have to pay IGST. When the goods are moving within the state, then it is CGST and IGST, depending on what rate. Suppose the rate is 18%, then become 9% CGST and 9% SGST. If it is interstate supply, then the IGST will be 18%. Suppose if the goods are attracting 18%. Yeah. Sir, I'm not able to get you.
All the states, states also have their own tax.
Yeah. अभी कोई स्टेट में कोई टैक्स नहीं है, सब एक ही बन गया ना जीएसटी.
Local VAT and other tax.
ये पहले था ना, ये जो पहले था उसका भी नया वर्जन जो है, और जो लोकल का सीजीएसटी बन गया है, एक्साइज एंड सर्विस टैक्स बिकम सीजीएसटी. हाउ इट हैज बिकम, हाउ द थिंग्स हैव डिवॉल्व्ड. अर्लियर द स्टेट वाज कलेक्टिंग वैट. Okay, so now they have to pay SGST. Now we have to pay SGST. So it is equivalent of VAT. So government is not losing, state government is not losing any revenue. What they were getting earlier as sales tax when they were goods are being sold within the state, now we pay SGST, which is called which is the GST only, state GST. Okay. Now there is no VAT, there is no excise this thing. So everything has been replaced by.
Each state, the 29 of them, have similar kind of taxes. No.
Similar. एक ही tax है. Only one nation, one tax. There is no different. It's getting. I'll explain that later. Okay.
For
UT also. अभी आ रहा है, वो अभी आएगा. So there is every government has their own act, but it's a replica of the central act. So there is no change. Okay. Fine. अभी आएगा, अभी क्वेश्चन आएंगे, आप देखना. अभी जस्ट होल्ड ऑन. इफ योर क्वेश्चन इज नॉट आंसर्ड, दैट आस्क मी. ओके. हाँ. हाँ, अगर 18% रेट है, सपोज दिस इज स्पेक्स, And if you buy a specs, you have to pay 18%. If I'm buying from, say, Maharashtra, then I have to pay 18% IGST. If I'm buying from within Delhi from someone, then I have to pay 9% CGST and 9% SGST.
So this entire sum is collected by the center, IGST.
Uh-huh.
As you said, it is shared with the state.
It's shared with the state. It comes under two pockets. You see, again, it comes within, everybody has to deposit the money with the depository. There is one portal. आपने वहाँ पैसा हुआ और वहाँ से सब डिवीजन हो जाता है. स्टेट का पैसा स्टेट को चला जाता है, गवर्नमेंट का पैसा चला जाता है.
So ये किस state को दिया जा रहा है? The one which is sending the goods or one which is receiving the goods?
Receiving the goods. अभी आ रहा है वो एग्जाम्पल आएगा. Just hold on. We have just started our this thing. There are questions which will tell you it's a destination based tax. Earlier it was manufacturer based tax. So that's why government like Gujarat, Maharashtra, they had protested heavily against this tax because they will be losing, because most consuming state may be West Bengal now, okay, or maybe Uttar Pradesh. They were not producing anything. Now they are getting the largest share, okay, fine, because all the tax has been going and their revenue is boosting up, whereas the states which are manufacturing, they are getting down less, okay. Fine. So this was kind of a debate and discussion among all the chief ministers, and they said that that's why they wanted at least diesel and petrol to बचा के रखो, बाकी तो उड़ गया था.
Sir, on the contrary, there is a lot of hue and cry as far as West Bengal is concerned. They are saying that we are not getting the share.
वो ऐसा होता है कि इसमें अभी मैं आपको बताऊंगा कि इसमें ना GST compensation cess होता है. I don't know what is the dispute, but I have not gone into the dispute why West Bengal is saying that not getting. But there are, there's something called GST cess, which government collects and passes on that money to the state government. Okay, that cess is basically on, it's called sin products like Coke, for example, or there are certain products, pan masala, cigarettes. Okay, so though earlier a tax was 60%. For example, on cigarette, for example, excise duty is 60%. Now the central government is collecting only 28%. Okay, so balance of 32% is collected as cess. Earlier, state governments were very happy to collect 60% on cigarettes, but they're not getting that. Okay, for example, let's say.
But has it not happened hegemony of the central, that federal structure has been, to some extent, it's been compromised. Everything is being collected by a central government, and then they have the power on, distributing it in all the states.
So I've not gone into that. I can't comment on that.
That is, see, I'll tell you one thing. At our level, I think that is more important.
Yeah.
We have to understand the dynamics.
हाँ, अभी वो उसमें भी कवर करेंगे. अभी आएगा आपका कुछ पोर्शन है उसमें, हाउ द सेंट्रल एंड स्टेट शेयर्स दैट मनी. विल डिस्कस दैट. ओके, फाइन. बट अभी डिस्प्यूट क्या है, व्हाई द गवर्नमेंट इज सेइंग दे आर नॉट गेटिंग, बट देयर आर वेरियस लूपहोल्स. There are a lot of not loopholes, but because we could not implement the GST the way we wanted in India, and there are a lot of compromises. Because of that, things are happening where the central government first gets the money and then passes on the money to the states. So that is there. Okay? So interstate supply. My job is to teach the law. Okay, so that is my primary job. Of course, if you have to understand, आपको ये समझ में आ जाएगा. You can read the material and understand whole thing, why the dispute is happening. Okay, once you understand, what are the gray areas, then you can understand what is written in the newspaper, why the dispute is arising. Okay, in the case of interstate supply within the state of UT, interstate supply within the state of UT, CGST will be payable to the central government, and SGST or UGST is payable to the state government. Okay, is that okay? और वो विद इन ब्रैकेट है. अगर वो यूटी आती है तो फिर वो यूजीएसटी बन जाता है. एसजीएसटी का वही दिया हुआ उसने. ओके, एरिया अप टू 12 nautical miles inside the sea is a part of the state or UT, whichever is the nearest. Please don't ask any questions, Navy people, because last time I had a lot of questions. ये 12 nautical mile क्या है? So it's your domain. क्लियर हो गया था, ठीक है. So a lot of people earlier they were I said ये आपका ही डोमेन है. I know only what is written here. I have not. No, high seas पे जो सेल हो रही है उसके ऊपर होता है जनरली. Okay. Provision illustrated. Now we are going to understand something through some examples. Then we talk about the input credit later on. First, simplified. Consider the following transaction. X of Jaipur sells 10,000 units of an article at the rate of 210 per article. Purchases Y of Ajmer. Now Jaipur Ajmer within the same state, and GST is 12%. This is an interstate supply within Rajasthan. GST will be shown as follows in the invoice. It is like this. taxable value of the supply 210 into 10,000 units. So the value becomes 21 lakhs at GST. So you will be raising an invoice at GST. CGST, because the rate is 12%, 6% will become CGST, which will be 1,26,000. SGST, which will be the Rajasthan government revenue, which will be 6% of rupees, same 1,26,000. So invoice will be 23,52,000. Now, very simple case. If X does not have any input tax credit, so there is no input tax credit, the central government will get 1,26,000. Likewise, the state government of Rajasthan will get 1,26,000. X will remit these taxes through internet banking by using the same challan. Okay, so this is the simplest case when he doesn't have any input tax credit to take. Okay, now suppose in the above case, the seller X and the purchaser Y in Chandigarh, the GST will be like this. So here it will be the same 21 lakhs. So we'll have 6% CGST and 6% will be UT because it is happening within the Union Territory of Chandigarh. Okay. So the amount charged, the bill will be only have different nomenclature here. Okay. Now, interstate supply. If the goods move from one state to another, supplying from one state or union territory to another state or union territory, in the case of interstate supply, IGST is payable to the central government because if the goods are moving from one state to another, IGST is there. No CGST, no SGST. So, Extra Maharashtra sells 10,000 units of an article at the rate of 210 and the purchaser is Y of Karnataka. Okay, two different states and GST is 12%. This is interstate supply, that is supply of Maharashtra to Karnataka. GST will be shown as follows. So the taxable value of supply will be 210 multiplied by again 2 lakh 21 lakh. Now GST there will be IGST of 12%. Okay, 2,52,000 becomes a government revenue to start with, and therefore then the share. If X does not have any tax input credit, central government will get 2,52,000. X will remit these taxes through internet banking. Revenue from ISG will be apportioned among the union and state by the parliament on the basis of recommendation of GST Council.
This is where the
Why
this is where
rationale
the
behind
problem
this?
is.
Hanji?
What is the rationale? Because previous tax is there.
Yeah.
If it was already divided into two parts here,
Yeah.
so what would have been the difference?
Where you say that here, this was in lieu of CST, okay, central sales tax. Where in earlier regime also, the CST which was collected by the central government on interstate supply of goods, that was shared among the states. So they continued with the same rationale. हाँ, they have said okay, पहले भी हम बांट लेते थे, अभी भी हम बांट लेंगे because it's an IGST now, which is nothing but the background is CGST, the background is the central sales tax, CST, which was earlier levied when the goods were moving from one state to another. हाँ जी, हाँ, nomenclature has changed.
Sir, so in this case also it will be 1,26,000 with the 1,26,000.
हाँ, possibly ऐसे ही होता होगा. I have not gone into the government account to see that, but ऐसे ही होता होगा. So my job is I just stick to my own area. I don't go beyond my area. बाकी आप पढ़ लो और इतनी नॉलेज मिल के आगे पढ़ सकते हो आप.
As per GST Council, it has to be divided.
हाँ, equally divide होता होगा. Definitely, your guess is absolutely right. It's divided.
Then why this question which Parag sir is just bringing up that this is where the gray area comes.
हाँ, ये अभी ये वाला जो कह रहे हैं. So I'm just telling you the pure act, and how this happens, how they share it. I have not gone beyond that. Because I'm teaching hundreds of subjects, I can't go in detail. इसमें मैं उतना डिटेल में नहीं गया कि गवर्नमेंट आपस में कैसे बांट रहे हैं.
So in this case, one line.
हाँ जी सर.
Last line which you have written that it may be distributed between the union and the states, means that central government and here the state will be
Karnataka, yeah.
not all the states.
No, not all the states. Not all the states. Okay. Because it's a recommendation, because that time the act has not come into being when I prepared the slides. Now it is actually, whatever the law has become. Yeah.
1,26,000 will be shared with only Karnataka now, since they are the consumer.
हाँ, जो डेस्टिनेशन स्टेट है उसी में स्टेट
उसको मिलेगा।
हाँ, उसी को मिलेगा.
महाराष्ट्र will not get.
हाँ, जो डेस्टिनेशन स्टेट है, जिस स्टेट में जाके वो माल कंज्यूम हो रहा है, उसी को मिलेगा. That is my 100% right guess. Okay. Now GST has been structured in a way that the essential services of food items are placed in the lower tax bracket, while the luxury services and products have been placed in the higher tax bracket. Okay. The GST Council has fitted over 300 goods, 1,300 goods and 500 services under 4 tax slabs: 5%, 12%, 18% and 28%. This is aside the tax on gold that is kept as 3%, and rough and precious uh, uh, so gold is 3% and precious semi-precious stones that are at 0.25%. Okay, so apart from these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rates, so there are two additional rates for gold, which is 3% and 0.25 for the semi-precious stones. 0% tax on necessity items like milk, wheat flour, 0.25% on, now if you see the whole of it, 0.25 on rough diamonds, 3% on gold and silver, 5%, 12%, 18%. I'll show you the bracket, some of the main items coming under this later on, 28%. Okay. Then there is a side indication which is given. So you can go and see the rates for each and everything for yourself. For each and every item, there's a rate given there. Okay. But I tried to put some rates here. Okay. Most of the goods fall in the category of 5%, 12%, 18%, while most of the services fall under the category 18%. So if they are goods, it will fall in 5, 12, and 18, but 90% of most of the services are coming under 18%. Okay, GST is 20%, 28% is applicable on some items like cement, car, tobacco. There is also a cess. Now, because tobacco and car, they are all called sin products according to the pan masala and cold drinks. So there is also a cess which is applicable only on handful of goods like car, tobacco, pan masala. Okay, which is basically to compensate the states. Earlier a lot of tax was being collected. There was 60%, 50% on pan masala. So everything has become now, either 18 or something like that. So over and above, the difference is collected as a cess. So these are, some of the rates, GST returns. So you can go to the portal, full rates. Okay. So you can just go through on your slides. So I'm just skipping that at the moment. 28% on luxury cars, pan masala, tobacco, aerated drinks. It's 28 plus cess, the last item. So there are two brackets of 28%. White goods cars, where there is no cess, but there are certain goods like luxury cars, pan masala, tobacco, aerated. There is a 28+% cess. This was basically because there is no revenue loss to the government, because earlier the tax rates were very high. So first of all, they thought that they will not integrate this into GST, but then at that time Arun Jaitley found a way, and he said this is the way the tax system is going to work in India. So a total of 81% of all the goods and services fall below or in 18% of the tax slabs. This means 7% items come under the exempted list, 14% items attract 5% of tax, 17% item attract 12% tax, 43% item attracts 18%. Now, of course, things might have changed a little bit when I prepared that. I prepared about 2 years back. While only 19% items fall under the highest slab of 28% in the new regime. So these are the exempted goods. 7% of the goods fall under this category. So all items there: fresh fruits, vegetables, milk, butter, milk curd, natural honey, all these items. Okay. And last is basically lodges with a tariff below 1,000 on rupees. So if you are staying in a lodge which has a tariff of 1,000, so there is no tax, it's an exempt. Then GST for supply of goods. For interstate supply, IGST rates are nil. So GST for the supply of goods, okay, and for supply of services. We're going to talk separately. For interstate supply, okay, IGST is charged nil, 0.25, 3, 5, 12, 18, and 28. So if the goods are moving from one state to another, so these are the rates which are called as IGST now. For intrastate supply, CGST will be 50% of IGST and SGST will be 50% of IGST. Okay, fine, simple. Besides, compensation cess is applicable in supply of tobacco products, pan masala, motor cars, coal, aerated waters, etc. For interstate supply of services, IGST is applicable. For interstate supply, CGST and SGST are applicable. CGST and SG rates are 50% of IGST. Same thing, but for separately for goods and supply for services. General rate of IGST is services 18%. However, in case of few services are taxed at 5, 12, and 8, 28. Moreover, a few cases services are exempt from GST, and we are going to talk about that. Okay. Compensation cess, okay, which is on that aerated water, drinks and all. In addition to CGST, IGST, UTGST, IGST, GST, compensation cess is payable on tobacco products, pan masala, motor cars, coal, aerated, etc. It is if the state loses revenue because of the abolition of central sales tax, central government will pay compensation for 5 years. So they said that they're going to pay compensation 5 years. It has already passed, but still the cess has not been abolished. Revenue generated through collection of GST compensation cess will be utilized for the payment of such compensation. So, so, so whatever revenue is collected because of the cess, it goes to the.
Sir, second paragraph in the
If the state loses revenue because of abolition of central sales tax, central government will pay compensation for 5 years. So if the state governments are losing because of this,
So this is like from 2017 onwards.
हाँ,
So now this will not be relevant anymore.
नहीं ये compensation cess से ही है जो compensation cess हो रहा है earlier I told you that items like pan masala, tobacco, motor car, इनके ऊपर टैक्स काफी था, particularly like tobacco products, pan masala, okay, and aerated drinks. The tax rate, or cigarettes, the tax rate was 50, 60.
Compensation of 5 years. You said GST is coming by 2017.
हाँ तो अब 2022 आ गया, हाँ तो लेकिन अभी भी कंपनसेशन सेस उसकी डेट एक्सटेंड कर दी है.
अच्छा तो वो टाइमलाइन है ना उसका बंद हो जाएगा.
हाँ बंद हो जाएगा. वो बंद हो जाना चाहिए तभी तक 2022 में बंद हो जाना चाहिए, तो नहीं हुआ है उसको. There has been extension given for another, I think, 2 or 3 years. I don't know.
How much percent is central government paying?
How much?
Percentage.
वो सारा का सारा पैसा स्टेट गवर्नमेंट का ही होता है, कंपनसेशन सेस जो है. Whatever tobacco sale happens within the state, किसी न किसी स्टेट में हो रही होगी, और उसका रेट अभी 28% हो गया है. पहले सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट वाज कलेक्टिंग 60%, ओके. 32% जो है दैट मनी इज कलेक्टेड एंड पेड बैक टू द स्टेट गवर्नमेंट बाय वे ऑफ कंपनसेशन सेस, ओके.
End user is
हाँ, एंड यूजर इज स्टिल पेइंग द हाई टैक्सेस ऑन टोबैको, कोल्ड ड्रिंक्स, पान मसाला, इनके ऊपर हैवी टैक्सेशन है. अभी भी हम बियर करते हैं, वो खत्म नहीं हुआ.
सेस का नाम
हाँ, सेस का नाम चेंज हो गया, बट बिकॉज देयर वाज अ काइंड ऑफ अ डेडलॉक between the states and the center. That's why we were one of the last country in the world to implement GST. And it took so much of time, so much of deliberations. So ultimately they have to find a way out कि किसी तरह से इसको अप्लाई करो और टाइम फ्रेम ला लो. उसको आगे जाके हम पेट्रोल, डीजल सबको जीएसटी में ले आएंगे, और ये भी जो हम कलेक्ट कर रहे हैं, आई मीन कंपनसेशन सेस बना रहे हैं, 60% टैक्स है, किसी में 50% है, दे विल ऑल गेट इन अंडर 28%.
Do you think, other than erasing or getting off from the administrative hassles,
हाँ.
the end user is still being penalized with the same tax?
एब्सोल्युटली. मतलब वो टैक्स रेट कम नहीं हुए हैं ऑन सर्टन गुड्स, ओके. हाँ, सिर्फ क्या हुआ है, द ओनली एडवांटेज विच हैज हैपेंड इज दैट बिकॉज इनपुट क्रेडिट इज अवेलेबल अक्रॉस, सो वी आर नॉट बेयरिंग द कैस्केडिंग इंपैक्ट ऑफ टैक्सेस. वो दैट इज द बिगेस्ट गेन व्हाट वी आर गेटिंग. टैक्स ऑन टैक्स हमारे को नहीं लग रहा, बस उससे हम बच गए, ओके. एंड अल्टीमेटली बिकॉज सिंस वी हैव नाउ अ सेंट्रल दिस थिंग, सो अ डे विल कम, सम टाइम द गवर्नमेंट विल डिसाइड खत्म करो इसको. तो जिस दिन वो चालू हो जाएगा, फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर विल टेक अ डिसीजन, नाउ वी हैव टू एंड दिस सेस, एनफ इज एनफ, because the revenues are ballooning, as you are saying, from 82,000 crores to 1,63,000. So I think it's a high time when the government, I mean, reduces and bans the cess. What are we waiting for?
On the lighter side, salaried people have tax on tax.
Ah. So it will happen because the tax, there's a buoyant collection of taxes because government needs more and more money. Okay, still we are having a deficit, okay, in our budgets. So still state governments are also having a deficit. So nobody wants to lose still money. They are still tax hungry. Now imports of goods is subject to payment of basic custom duty, education cess, and secondary education cess. Besides, IGST and CGST compensation will be applicable by virtue of section 25. हाँ, ये मैं आपको बता चुका हूँ. I mean, I'm not going into that. Okay. Now administrative control. The tax is payable to both central and state government / union territory. However, administrative control will be exercised either by state government or union territory by the central government in the case of particular taxpayer. So wherever he is registered, that administrative control remains with that state. Okay. Now GST not applicable on petroleum products. Petroleum products, crude, high-speed diesel, motor spirit, and petrol, natural gas, aviation fuel, turbine fuel will continue under excise duty. Presently, these are out of GST and may be brought within the purview of GST by the government in future. So still that future has not come. This was 2017 when they decided, but the state government don't want to lose money. There's a huge amount of money which they're getting. You know, the diesel is taxed, petrol is taxed at 22%, 25%, 18%, depending on which state it is being taxed. So they don't want to lose, and it is a almost like 30 to 40% of revenue which was collected earlier of the whole amount which they're collecting in the old regime. Presently, alcohol. Presently, it is out of GST. State excise duty will be continued. So alcohol is also out of GST. Still, you have state excise duty on it. Tobacco products is subject to GST 18% plus the compensation. So this tobacco was brought under GST, but with a cess on that. State GST Acts. Now we talk about the acts, and then we go on to the input credit. It's very important. Okay, to impose. Huh.
When you were discussing the GST,
Yeah. Why it is 3% on? See, gold is a very high value added thing. So maybe because because you have to look for the reason. On the Google basically. But generally, precious stones and gold are very highly. If there's an 18% on gold, there will be a lot of evasion which may happen. Okay, people will buy gold by paying cash. Okay. Yeah. So that there can be reasons, because some people save by investing, because gold is a last resort kind of investment asset.
So that the diamond sales gets increased.
Yeah. Or now what happens again? कई लोग gold खरीदते हैं as an investment asset.
Exactly. That's why the diamond
So it will be against our culture. So maybe that they have kept it low. Otherwise, if they kept 18%, people will all pay cash. Even today we go and pay up to 2 lakh rupees. You can buy cash and save this thing. Yeah. So to impose SGST on supply of goods or services within the state, each state has passed its own GST Act. So every state has passed its own GST Act, which is replicated all across India. Same act. What Union has passed as CGST, the same is passed by the state governments. Okay. These states, the GST Acts are copies of the CGST. All provisions are identical. Earlier, we are having different local sales tax laws across, all the states. Now there is only one.
It's like a legislation mandate.
Yeah.
They have to follow.
Absolutely, because this is the way as you said, this has been formed. Okay, the constitution where they give powers to the state and to the center to levy tax. Now the the state government don't want to lose their power, so they still want they should have their own act. Okay, but they can't do anything about it. But they say कि act तो होना चाहिए. सब कुछ तो चला गया, कम से कम act तो रहे हमारे पास जो अपना act है. हालांकि एक ही सिंगल act बनाते तो फिर तो सारा पावर गवर्नमेंट सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट के पास आ जाता. No state government will like that. Okay, to lose all the powers. The union territory, now what happens is that there are some union territories which have a legislature, some union territories don't have. So where there is no this thing, like Delhi has its own government, so they have passed their own act. The government where Dadar, Nagar Haveli, where the central government has passed in the parliament itself the law. So that is the administrative part. कई state government जो है उनकी full fledged government नहीं है. So they are unable to pass the laws there. So central government has passed the law for them centrally. Okay, that is what it's saying. Okay, so this I'm just skipping. This is nothing. This is academic only. Registration now. Everybody needs to get himself registered if you are doing business. Okay, so GST registration is an online process where GST law implies that any business entity should obtain a unique number by concerned tax authority for collecting the tax and for availing input tax credit. So you should have a registration number. Okay, you should go and register yourself under the portal. Okay, so for availing the input tax credit and for collecting tax. Okay, it's a PAN based state specific registration. So it's a PAN based. So your PAN 10-digit PAN will be part of your GST number. The supplier is allotted 15-digit GST identification number, and within that 15 you will have 10 numbers of the PAN. I'm going to explain how this thing there. And the certificate of registration is made available for the applicant on the portal. Voluntary registration is also allowed. You can even get yourself registered, but there is a rule that there is a threshold limit. If your sale crosses that, then you must get yourself registered. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Now, format of this thing number. The first two digits represent the state code. Like, as per the Indian census 2012, every state has a unique code. For example, state of Karnataka has 29, state of Delhi has 0.07. The next 10 digit will be the PAN number of the taxpayer. The 13 digit will be assigned based on the number of registration within the state. Suppose if you have multiple registration, in case it happens like that, so the 13 digit will be your number of registrations there. The 14 digit will be Z by default. Okay, and the last digit will be a check code. Okay, so it will look like a code 15 digit. Okay, then in you may have one or two registrations. Okay, because you are doing different businesses. Yeah, yeah. ओके नहीं, अगर सपोज आपके फॉर एग्जांपल आपके दो बिजनेस हैं एक ही स्टेट के अंदर,
सेम पैन पे
सेम पैन, आपका पैन नंबर तो एक ही है क्योंकि यू आर द इंडिविजुअल, यू आर सपोज यू आर अ प्रोप्राइटर, यू आर डूइंग वन इज योर किराना शॉप एंड अदर इज योर टॉय शॉप, सपोज एग्जांपल आई एम गिविंग दैट। आपने दोनों बिजनेस अलग चला रहे हो, है ना, तो आप दो रजिस्ट्रेशन ले लिया आपने सपोज, बिकॉज ये टू सेपरेट बिजनेस।
तो सर वो बताइए सर, वो एडवाइजेबल है या नहीं है?
आई एम नॉट योर एडवाइजर, आई एम ओनली अ प्रोफेसर। ये बात बाद में करेंगे, ये बात अच्छा, okay, so we will discuss this later. Okay, I'm just park this question, we'll discuss this more in detail, what is advisable, what is not advisable, because otherwise we'll be lost into some other discussion.
दो बिजनेस है
हाँ, तो दो बिजनेस है तो आप सपोज दो रजिस्ट्रेशन कराते हो, सपोज यू आर गेटिंग टू रजिस्ट्रेशंस। ओके, आपने दो बिजनेस लिए हुए, जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल माय डॉटर इन लॉ एंड माय सन, दे आर डूइंग बिजनेस इन उत्तराखंड। ओके, so one business is run by my daughter-in-law, another business is run by my son-in-law and daughter-in-law combined. Okay, so they have two registrations within the state. Now they may have different, अब एक में दो पैन नंबर है, एक में एक पैन नंबर, so आपने दो रजिस्ट्रेशन कराई हुई है, तो अगर आप you say that you're the same people, so they will give you two registrations. Okay, I'm just thinking aloud, मैं अब इसके बारे में बाद में डिस्कस करेंगे तो अच्छा रहेगा, आपकी दो रजिस्ट्रेशन हो सकती हैं। ओके, now I'm not getting so far what is your question? Anybody just can relay the question?
He's asking, can we have registrations for two different products and
See, on registration part, on multiple registration, I'm holding my thought at the moment because it will involve, evasion of tax. अभी हम जब देखेंगे तो आपको सिर्फ multiple registration are allowed only under certain cases. Okay, when we see the threshold limit, आप बोलोगे 20 लाख की है तो मैं दो बना लेता हूँ, then your question will be like, so we will go into that. Okay, and more important is the person who is your consultant, he'll advise you better. Okay, fine, I am not your income tax consultant nor I am your GST consultant, to be very frank, sorry, कल को आप मुझे कोड करो, हाँ, we will be doing that, I will be covering all the schemes, everything, but if you seek my advice, so I'll say hold on, go to your consultant who is handling your case day-to-day basis. Fine, okay. I may? हाँ, yeah. Okay, so we will cover that in our last 10 slides are covering that, e-commerce and other things. Okay, let's come to that. Okay, and if your question is not answered, then you ask, at that time ask me the question. Okay, it will become relevant because we will be doing that only. Okay, now interstate stock transfer. Okay, when the goods move from one state to another within the same company. Okay, if suppose there is one company who was selling his goods, who was transferring his goods from Maharashtra because he was manufacturing there and he was transferring to his Delhi godown. Delhi में उसका godown है, Delhi में business है. So this is called the stock transfer. Earlier there was no tax on stock transfers. If you are transferring goods from one state to another on stock transfers, there was no tax. Okay, but this was highly disputable, highly debatable because you people were using this and misusing this. So now that has been brought to rest. Even if there is a stock transfer, you have to pay tax. Even if your one company is transferring their own goods to their own branch, the tax has to be paid. Now, when from the branch the goods will be sold, then whatever tax you have paid, you will get the tax credit. So this plugs the loophole of earlier regime. Let's understand. Supply of goods and services between two distinct persons having different GST in the course is subject to GST. Okay. The law says that if you have two different GSTs, then it is taxable. This covers even interstate stock transfers and branch transfers.
Say two distinct persons
हाँ
having two different GST, but what you just mentioned was
हाँ
कि मेरी company यहाँ पे है
हाँ
और
हाँ
दूसरी state में
supply of goods services between two distinct persons having different GST in the course of business subject. Now this is the general law. This is the law. Fine. कि अगर आपके दो अलग लोग हैं तो होंगे, but they have covered now that there is a exception to the rule. Okay, fine. This covers even the interstate stock transfers and branch transfers. Okay. Now, I have not put that this is an exception, but this says that even interstate. Now, ऊपर वाले में वो ये कह रहा है कि अगर दो अलग अलग हैं तो ही टैक्स लगेगा, isn't it?
आपने बोला तो उससे ये समझ आ रहा है having same GST number.
हाँ
मैंने एक स्टेट से दूसरी स्टेट में ट्रांसफर करा,
हाँ
मेरा यहाँ पे अच्छा मेरा GST नंबर चेंज हो जाएगा बिकॉज मैं दो जगह पे दो अलग स्टेट्स में रजिस्टर्ड हूँ.
नहीं GST नंबर तो एक ही होगा ना आपका. आपने तो पैन इंडिया ले लिया. मैं ये कह रहा हूँ अभी एक सेकंड, आप ना फर्स्ट वाला बॉक्स को एक सेकंड भूल जाओ, एक सेकंड भूल जाओ. Okay, don't get confused what is written in the top box. Now I'm just telling you, that earlier when the goods are moving from one state to another state, if it happens to be the same guy, like X Limited, who was transferring the goods from Mumbai to Delhi to his godown, okay, and from Delhi godown the goods are sold to the ultimate consumer. Now suppose in Delhi the rate is 6% earlier, and Mumbai the rate was 12%. So if he would have invoiced the rate from Mumbai, he would have to pay CGST, sorry, Central Sales Tax, which was 10%. यहाँ पर आप गुड्स मूव होते हैं विद इन द स्टेट, द टैक्स रेट इज 5%, क्योंकि दिल्ली में उसमें 5% टैक्स है और सेंट्रल सेल्स टैक्स का रेट जो है वो सपोज 10% है. सो ही व्हाट ही विल डू, ही विल ट्रांसफर द गुड्स टू दिल्ली एंड सेल द गुड्स विद इन दिल्ली. फाइन. सो दिस वे पीपल वर मैनेजिंग देयर बिजनेसेस. People were hiring consultants कि कैसे अपना टैक्स कम करा जाए, बिकॉज एवरी स्टेट देयर वाज डिफरेंट टैक्स, डिफरेंट रूल्स. सो दे सेड स्टॉक ट्रांसफर कर लो और वहां से आप इनवॉइसिंग कर लो. अब क्या हो गया है कि आप कुछ भी करो, अगर स्टॉक ट्रांसफर भी करोगे तो जहां से वो गुड्स मूव हो रहे हैं, मुंबई से दिल्ली आ रहे हैं, तो आपको जीएसटी पे करना पड़ेगा. ओके. अब क्योंकि जीएसटी रेट तो एक ही है, वो तो अलग अलग है नहीं. अब दिल्ली में माल आ गया, दिल्ली में जब आप अल्टीमेट कंज्यूमर को गुड्स करोगे, बेचोगे, तो वट एवर GST you have paid on inter-stock transfer from one state to another, your own transfer, whatever you have paid, you will get the input tax credit. So that means the tax which you have paid earlier will now get absorbed. Ultimately, it is paid by the consumer, but it will involve a hassle for the manufacturer because, suppose the goods are moving from Mumbai and after 6 months they are sold in Delhi. So the inventory is lying in Delhi, which has already suffered a tax because it's not a sale so far. उसके हिसाब से तो सेल हुई नहीं है, क्योंकि he was transferring everything in bulk because most of his customers were in Delhi, and suppose in say Kolkata or any place where he was transferring bulk to everywhere. So he was keeping say 3 months or 2 months inventory. So now he has to pay tax on his inventory. So this was a kind of a hue and cry when this rule was announced. So but the government didn't, but they said no, tax will be this thing because then people were misusing it. Okay, ये है. बाकी स्लाइड में कुछ लिखा हुआ है, उससे आप मतलब बंद निकालो. अब हम देखते हैं. For instance, the supply of goods services by Punjab branch of X to Maharashtra branch of Y of X Limited is subject to GST. Of course, the input tax credit is available to Maharashtra branch. तो इसमें गुड्स कहाँ चल रहे हैं? पंजाब से महाराष्ट्र में आ रहे हैं, और जो आपने टैक्स पे करा है उसका इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट महाराष्ट्र ब्रांच को मिल जाएगा. ओके. नाउ एज फार एज जीएसटी नंबर इज कंसर्न, देयर विल बी ओनली वन जीएसटी फॉर दिस गाय. पंजाब जो वाला जो है, दोनों ब्रांचेस हैं, उसका ये नहीं कि हर ब्रांच का अपना अलग अलग जीएसटी होगा, एक का ही होगा. ओके. नाउ लाइकवाइज सर्विसेज प्रोवाइड बाय टेलीकम्युनिकेशन कंपनीज और बैंक्स to their branches in another state is subject to GST. So this is applicable to whether services or to goods, irrespective. Okay. Distinction between goods and services. GST is applicable whether it is supply of goods or services. However, distinction has been made in few cases. This distinction is relevant to ascertain the place of supply, time of supply, valuation of and the compensation scheme. There are some supplies which are neither goods nor services. For instance, services provided by an employee in the course of his employment is neither treated as a supply of goods or services. So if there is an employee-employee relationship, employee is providing services to the employer, okay? So in this case, this is an exempted category. These cases are specified in Schedule 3. So there is a special Schedule 3 which says all these services would be exempt from any tax. Okay?
One point I want to ask.
Ah,
Here to ask. Ultimately, who's paying GST? The consumer.
yeah.
When it is moving interstate to state, there's a billing that is happening, the cost of the good is lesser than what doing in a service.
क्या क्या चीज है, क्या सर क्वेश्चन बताइए, रिले कीजिए, क्या बोला था आप, इन्होंने क्या पूछा था, आप बताइए सर.
When what is moving from one place to another, ultimately tax is being GST is being paid by the consumer.
कंज्यूमर, या
तो अगर पंजाब ने महाराष्ट्र में भेजा, उसका रेट अलग हो, महाराष्ट्र जो दे रहा है कंज्यूमर को अलग हो,
हाँ.
तो कॉम्पनसेट हो गया, नहीं तो टैक्स ही नहीं लगा, तो कैस्केडिंग इफेक्ट हो ही रहा है.
सी जो पहला पार्ट है वो बिजनेस वाला पार्ट है, जो सिर्फ गवर्नमेंट का पार्ट था कि दैट टैक्स विल बी पेड एंड ही कैन क्लेम द इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट. बाकी पंजाब में रेट अलग है या दिल्ली में रेट अलग है. नाउ रेट द रेट्स आर सेम एवरीवेयर, बारिंग ओनली द कॉस्ट ऑफ ट्रांसपोर्टेशन और समथिंग.
सर ने जो पूछा सर, दिस ब्रिंग्स अप द सेकंड क्वेश्चन जो मेरा पहला वाला ओरिजिनल क्वेश्चन
हाँ.
था कि मैंने 100 रुपए का मैन्युफैक्चरर ने सामान बनाया.
ओके,
अब वो मैंने 100 रुपए में नेक्स्ट डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर.
हाँ मैंने बताया था, उसके एग्जाम्पल आएंगे, उसकी तक वेट करो. हाँ, उसकी तक वेट करो, उसके लिए वेट करो. उस टाइम देयर विल बी एन एप्रोप्रिएट टाइम टू आस्क दिस क्वेश्चन बिकॉज वी विल बी डिस्कसिंग ओनली दिस. हाँ हाँ, so we'll talk about that in detail. Okay, fine. So please, हाँ हाँ जी, एक सेकंड सर, there's a lot of discussion happening here. Yeah. नहीं, where ultimately the sale is going to happen. हाँ, वो वहां पर होगा, बिकॉज डेस्टिनेशन बेस्ड ना, जहां सेल हो रही है उस गवर्नमेंट को रेवेन्यू जाएगा. दिस एब्सोल्युटली क्लियर. इट वाज मैन्युफैक्चर्ड इन मुंबई और इट वाज मैन्युफैक्चर्ड इन पंजाब, विच प्लेस इट इज. जिस स्टेट में मैन्युफैक्चर हुआ और चला गया उस स्टेट, अगली स्टेट में, वहां पर उसको मिलेगा. ओके, लेट्स मूव ऑन. नाउ कंसिडरेशन. सो इफ देयर हैज टू बी अ कंसिडरेशन. Okay, GST is applicable if goods or services are supplied for a consideration. Consideration need not be in cash. It may be in kind. If consideration is nil, GST is not applicable. If the goods are moving free, there is no GST. Let's understand some rules regarding this. Okay. However, activities given in Schedule 1 are subject to GST even if there is no consideration. For instance, supply of goods or services by a taxable person to a related person are subject to GST even if the consideration is nil. If the goods are moving from one person to another person who is related to that person, either a blood relation or it's a subsidiary of the holding company relationship or whatever has been defined as relation under GST, consideration nil, even the supplies by way of gift. अगर गिफ्ट है या फ्री बेचा है या गिफ्ट कह लो, जो भी कह लो, GST लगेगा. अब हम एग्जाम्पल देखते हैं. In other words, free gifts to a related person is subject to GST. Employer and employee have been treated as related persons for the purpose of GST. For instance, if an asset is gifted by a company to its employees, okay, it is subject to GST. For example, when a person leaves his job, he is given a lot of, like he was having a car, company owned car, and the company says you can take because almost it is fully depreciated. So even if the consideration is absent in this case, GST is applicable. However, gifts up to 50,000 rupees in a financial year to an employee is not subject to GST. अगर वो 50,000 से नीचे है, गिफ्ट है, तो एम्प्लॉयर केस में कोई टैक्स नहीं है. हाँ, डेप्रिशिएटेड वैल्यू अगर 50,000 है तो नीचे है तो कोई टैक्स नहीं है. अगर 1 लाख की गाड़ी बच गई है तो फिर आपको टैक्स देना पड़ेगा. वो 1 लाख पे ही देना पड़ेगा.
वो कंपनी बोलेगी एम्प्लॉय को तुम इतना टैक्स पे कर दो और गाड़ी फ्री ले लो.
क्या कर लो? हाँ, अब बाकी अब वो जो भी तरीके निकाले, अब तो 1 लाख की डेप्रिशिएटेड वैल्यू है तो देयर इज नो वे आउट ना. कि भाई हाँ वो 50,000 कैश दे दे, चेक दे दे और 50,000 पे गाड़ी ट्रांसफर कर दे, तो फिर वो उसको 50,000 का टैक्स बच जाएगा। कुछ कर सकते हैं, बट एम्प्लॉय जनरली ऐसा करते नहीं है ना। जनरली इफ यू आर वर्किंग इन अ लार्ज ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, unless they have come with a policy like small concern which is owned by an individual, then you can always do all those kinds of things, but bigger organizations never enter into such transactions. Gifts up to rupees 50,000 in a year. हाँ हाँ, now such kind of disputes arise, they keep arising, है ना। some state governments have, courts have passed judgment कि 50,000 तक की तो है, और बाकी अगर 75,000 का है तो 25,000 पे टैक्स लगेगा। हाँ, अब क्या है, there are several matters which are lying in various courts which have been decided. I'll just show you one, okay, and where the central government GST council has to take a view, right? तो अब उनका व्यू देखेंगे क्या है। अब तक कोई व्यू नहीं आया इसके ऊपर, कोई केस है ही नहीं, बट देयर आर सर्टेन मैटर्स, देयर आर केसेस लाइक दिस। आई विल शो यू वन केस। One case is, how many people are staying in societies where you have to pay CAM charges. CAM pay करना पड़ता है. So CAM, up to 7,500 which is collected, there is no GST. 7,500 रुपए अगर कोई आदमी आपको मंथली कैम ले रहा है, आई डोंट नो वेदर आपका कैम कम है ज्यादा, आई डोंट नो. CAM is the common area maintenance charge. So if you pay those charges, then anything which is below 7,500, there is no GST. So any house which is paying beyond 7,500, like I'm staying in a colony where almost like 10% of the people who own 500 square yards and above, houses or villas, they have to pay the 18% GST. So anybody who's below 500, there is no GST because the CAM charges fall below 7,500. Now in Madras, this thing I'll just show you. So there are a lot of examples which will come, जो आप पूछ रहे हैं अभी आएगा. Okay, just have a look here. Just read, sir. आप कौन सा पढ़ेंगे?
Residents who pay the maintenance charges to the RWA and housing society exempt from paying GST. Yes, maintenance charges paid by residents to the Resident Welfare Association are exempt up to 7,500 rupees. In case the amount charged exceeds 7,500 per month per member, GST is chargeable on the entire amount charged.
Okay, so if you are paying 8,000, you have to pay 18% that. Now there is a dispute which has happened in Madras. Just read that.
As per the Madras High Court order in the case of TVH, Jubilee Square Owners Association, July 2021, the GST must be charged on the amount collected over above 7,500 and not the entire amount. It must be seen how the government takes this matter to the apex court.
Now the matter will be decided by the court only, the Supreme Court, because it has been passed by the High Court. So, if they have to contest, then the central government will take this matter to the Supreme Court and then, try to get a order in favor. क्या चीज? हाँ.
So, 7,500 rupees is it for the collective or per resident?
Per resident.
Per resident 18% देना पड़ेगा.
हाँ, जैसे मैं आपको बताता हूँ. Suppose 20 rupees per square yard. For example, in our case, the villas community, तो हमने 20 रुपए चार्ज कर रहे हैं लोगों से per square yard. And suppose the house is 500 square yards, for example. So it becomes how much? 10,000. Okay? So 10,000 इसके ऊपर 18%, 1,800 रुपया उसको इनवॉइस होगा 11,000. Suppose it was 300. Okay, then it will become how much? 6,000. So there is no tax on it, but there is a tax of 1,800. Now, इसमें क्या होता है? Because this 20 rupees what we are collecting from all the owners of the houses, we are taking services. Okay, we are taking services for the security guards, for horticulture maintenance. कई सारे हमारे होते हैं. So there is one body who is providing these services, and that body we have engaged a body called Nimbus, who is a service provider, who provides almost 90% of our requirements. Okay, so this is an organization in Gurgaon. There are many organizations. So we are engaged Nimbus. Okay, so अब जब वो bill raise करती है, suppose they are raising a bill of 50 lakh rupees. Okay, per month. Okay, so they are charging 18% on that. So this comes to how much? 18,000? 9 lakhs. So they raise a bill of 59 lakhs on us. Fine. So हमने 9 lakh का तो GST पे कर दिया. But now these houses are only 10% and this type of houses are 90%. Is that okay? तो अभी हमको जो ये जो 9 lakhs का जो है हमने GST पे कराया, इसका सिर्फ 10% ही इनपुट टैक्स मिलेगा, 90% ये होगा. If our final output services are exempt, partially taxable. Okay, just listen to me. Suppose we were charging to everyone GST, then we would have entitled for entire 9 lakh rupees of input credit. Our cost would have been only 50 lakhs.
So the 9 lakhs were compared to the refund fee.
हाँ, जो 9 लाख का रिफंड नहीं है, हमने जब ये जो पैसा हमने कलेक्ट करा है, ये गवर्नमेंट को जमा कराएंगे, है ना? जब जमा कराएंगे तो हम इसमें से जो हमने इनपुट क्रेडिट जो हमें उतना कम जमा कराएं, है ना? ये 1800 रुपए पे हमें सपोज 100 घर है, तो ये 1,80,000 हो गए,
तो 9 लाख में से 1,80,000
कम हो जाएगा. मतलब ऐसा मोटा मोटा, बट वो परसेंटेज प्रोपोर्शनेट बेसिस पे होता है. एक्चुअल कैलकुलेशन डिफर अ बिट, but you can just for simplification you can understand that we will get only a credit of 1,80,000. But since our 90% are exempt, 10%, so हमें उतना ही मिलेगा अल्टीमेटली. जो आप कह रहे हो उसी के हिसाब से अभी इतना समझ. भाई डिपॉजिट क्या, हमने तो 59 lakhs दे दिया निम्बस को, निम्बस डिपॉजिट करेगा ना. हाँ, हमें फायदा देखो, अगर सबने पे करा होता हमें 9 लाख का क्रेडिट मिल जाता. ओके फाइन. और हमने जो जीएसटी गवर्नमेंट को देना था बाय कलेक्टिंग फ्रॉम द इनवॉइसेस, सो वी वुड हैव गॉट द इनपुट क्रेडिट. हमारे पास क्या है, इनपुट क्रेडिट है, ये 9 लाख का. ये 9 लाख विच इज, तो वी आर एंटाइटल्ड. अगर हम 100% सब ओनर्स को सबको जीएसटी कर रहे हैं तो हमारे पास 9 लाख का क्रेडिट पूरा ले सकते हैं. और हाँ, मैं आपको ना एग्जैक्टली दिखाऊंगा, जब अपना वर्किंग दिखाऊंगा तब आपको होगा. वो एंड में है, इनपुट क्रेडिट इज कमिंग जस्ट एट द एंड ऑफ दिस थिंग. ओके ओके. हाँ
सर, पहला क्वेश्चन ये है, अगर ये 7,500 आपने बोला,
हाँ,
इसी को मैं 10,000 से रिलेट करूं,
हाँ,
तो टैक्स मेरा 2,500 पे लगेगा या मेरा 10,000 पे लगेगा? पहला क्वेश्चन.
पहला हाँ, इसका आंसर है 10,000 पे लगेगा. मैंने आपको 10,000 पे कर दिया था ना, 18%.
ठीक है. और ये जो आपने 9 लाख रुपए टैक्स बनाया,
हाँ,
अब मेरे जैसे आपने बोला 10 लोग हैं जिनकी विला है 500 गज की,
हाँ,
तो ये 500 गज वालों बिलों के हिसाब से मेरा 9 लाख रुपए टैक्स बना है या मेरा टोटल सोसाइटी का 9 लाख बना है?
ऐसा अब मैंने ये 1,80,000 रुपए कलेक्ट कर लिया. अब सुनो, हमने 9 लाख तो निम्बस को जीएसटी पे कर दिया. निम्बस का बिल आया 59 lakhs का, हु इज द सर्विस प्रोवाइडेड टू अस, ही हैज चार्ज 18% टैक्स ऑन ऑल कंप्लीट बिल. ओके फाइन, दे विल चार्ज और नॉट, इसमें कोई डाउट है? Suppose we are taking services from someone, we are paying 18% tax to that guy. So our society is going to suffer 18% tax on whatever services we are taking from anywhere. There should not be any dispute on that. तो हमारे को GST 9 लाख मिल गया. But then I told all the GST becomes a pass through. It will become only a pass through when your final product, which you are selling to your ultimate consumers, it is 100% taxable. But if it is not 100% taxable, then to the extent which is taxable, you will get the input credit. अब यहां पर हमारा सिर्फ 10% लोग ही टैक्सेबल है, 90% तो एग्जेम्प्ट. तो जो हमने ये 9 लाख पे करा था, तो हमें सिर्फ इतना जो हमने टैक्स कलेक्ट करा था, वो ही हमारे जो गवर्नमेंट को टैक्स पे करेंगे, तो हम पर 9 लाख का, हम 1,80,000 हमारा बच जाएगा. तो हमारी जो टैक्स खर्चा आएगा फॉर एग्जाम्पल विल बी 6,80,000. तो हमारा एक्सपेंस होगा 56,80,000. Our expense will be only 56. Suppose simple में, without going into the specific, we had to pay 59 lakhs. We paid to Nimbus 59 lakhs. हाँ.
सर मैं सिंपल से पूछूंगा, किसी ने दिया 6,000, किसी ने दिया 11,800.
हाँ.
ठीक है सर.
हाँ.
गवर्नमेंट को क्या पता कि 6,000 किसने दिया और 11,800 किसने दिया? मैं पूरा कितने क्रेडिट लूंगा 9 लाख का? अरे सर मैं क्रेडिट तो पूरा लेने की कोशिश करूंगा ना, मैं लॉस में क्यों जाऊंगा?
सपोज आप यू आर द विला ओनर देयर और दिस आप बोलो मेरे को टैक्स लगता नहीं है, आप मुझे टैक्स क्यों लगाएंगे? तो आप इनडायरेक्टली टैक्स हो, आप
पेपर एक्शन तो कर सकते
हाँ हम कर सकते हैं, लेकिन हमने क्या करते हैं, हमने जब कैलकुलेट करा कि हम सबको जीएसटी लगा दें, सपोज ऐसा भी करें है, और हम वो 9 लाख का इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट दें। नाउ देवर अबाउट 15 पीपल हु आर ऑल मेंबर्स, हु आर डिसाइडिंग मेंबर्स, उसमें से 10 ने बोला नो नो। सुनो, अब क्या, अल्टीमेटली द इकोनॉमिक सेंस हैज टू प्रिवेल, सो वी डिड अ कैलकुलेशन that suppose if we are allowed to charge GST on everyone, suppose they say you are not allowed as per rule of GST, if somebody is exempt, they can go to the court and challenge you. Then there will be a lot of litigation. So they were trying to give this view. ये भी होते हैं ना, ऐसे इतना सिंपली नहीं है। और फिर हमने एक व्यू लिया कि अगर हम सारा
लॉसेस कर,
हाँ, अगर हम नहीं, ये लॉस नहीं हो रहा था, मैंने देखा वी रेवेन्यू न्यूट्रल, हमें कोई लॉस नहीं हो रहा। ऐसा है, देखो अब इंडिविजुअल टैक्स लग गया, सपोज आज मेरे को 6,000 रुपए का मंथली बिल आता है सपोज, तो इसके ऊपर मैं 1,600 रुपए टैक्स पे करता हूँ, 1200 रुपए टैक्स पे करता हूँ, तो मेरा बिल 7200 आएगा। अभी मेरा बिल 6,000 आ रहा है, तो मेरी जेब से 1200 निकल ही जाए ना। अब मैं वो जो 9 लाख है उसको डिवाइड करूँ टोटल नंबर ऑफ घर से और देखूं पर यूनिट का कितना आ रहा है, तो मैं देखता हूँ कि मुझे सेविंग हो रही है नहीं हो रही है। So that those calculations we did, and we found that let remain there because there was a lot of hue and cry. Now moving on to a fully taxable scenario. हाँ जी, हाँ जी, हाँ किसका? Actually, we have moved to little something. हम step by step smaller calculations we do and we understand the sliding and show the return.
सर दिस इज प्रेजेंटेशन वाज मेड टू गो बैक टू
Okay, just hold on. See, regarding any confusion on everything, so that confusion will all go away once we reach to the input credit section, and we'll be doing at least 10 examples. Once those examples are done, I'll show you my society, this thing also, how we are paying, how we are collecting, and it will clarify in your mind, absolutely. पूरा समझ में आ जाएगा। एक थोड़ा सा और, अभी टाइम है 5 मिनट। अच्छा एक, हाँ जी, नहीं मैं तो हर महीने हफ्ते में चेंज कर रहा हूँ। ये तो अभी है, ये तो अभी है, ये तो रिसेंट बना, ये कल ही। Okay, just we'll end up somewhere. I'm just let's see where we have reached. So we'll be doing composition scheme also. Consideration. Okay. So consideration we have done. Let's see what is next. Okay. Okay. This last slide. Okay. Supply way of gift between unrelated person is not subject to GST. If there is an unrelated people and there is a gift, there is no tax. But input tax credit will have to be reversed. Suppose I have bought something and I am gifting to sir, then whatever tax I have paid, GST, that I'll take a reversal of that input credit. फिर मुझे इसका benefit नहीं मिलेगा. I can't take because I'm giving you free. Okay. So for that I'm not allowed input tax credit. See, if suppose I am a dealer or a manufacturer or a businessman, okay, whatever tax I pay, on whatever material I buy. I have to pay tax and I am allowed for input tax credit, isn't it? Now, suppose I am gifting something of my final product to someone, उसके ऊपर कोई GST लगेगा नहीं. So the portion of the money which I am gifting, that tax which I have paid on the item which I have purchased.
बोला था पहले सर कि टैक्स तो पे करना पड़ेगा.
Tax, suppose every person has to pay tax. Every person who is a manufacturer, who is a dealer, has to pay first GST. Okay, then he can claim the input credit later on when he sells the goods to the final consumer. So only if he sells, suppose I bought something and gave it to gift to someone, तो फिर मेरे को input credit क्यों मिलेगा भाई? ये चलो, because we are actually reaching to the lunch time, so we will come back after lunch with a fresh mind. ये gift between related persons subject to GST. That's all. We'll come back. क्या रह गया?
ये मैन्युफैक्चरर ने 100 रुपए का बताया था.
हाँ,
डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर को उसने इनवॉइस किया बिल जीएसटी.
अभी आएंगे ना सर, अभी आए कहाँ हैं हम अभी? ये देखो, यहाँ आ जाओ. ये जीएसटी तो काफी लंबा टॉपिक है ना. ये देखो, ये आ रहा है पूरा जो आपका. जस्ट रीड दिस.
मैं आपकी बात समझ गया कि आगे आएगा. मैं सिंपल ही
हाँ, ठीक है.
अपना तो मार्केट बना के देगा ना.
हाँ, हाँ.
200 रुपए प्लस 18% लगाएगा.
ठीक है.
जब कंज्यूमर के पास है 200 रुपए प्लस कंज्यूमर तक लेके इतना. तो इसमें ये जिसका टैक्स कंपोनेंट निकाला है ना, जो ये क्लेम कर सकते हैं हम. और इसमें तो 500 रुपए की चीज बन गई और उसका जो टैक्स कंपोनेंट बहुत हाई हो गया. वो कैसे कवर हो रहा है सर?
सर वही करेंगे, बिल्कुल करेंगे. विल सी 3 people goods are passing from A, B, C, D. अल्टीमेटली जो टैक्स जैसा आप कह रहे हैं वही एग्जांपल आ रहा है. We will, अगर मैं अभी कराऊंगा ना, देखो वहां बैठे लोग ना काफी कंफ्यूज हो रहे हैं सर. हम वी आर गेटिंग कंफ्यूज. आप जो कह रहे हैं वो इमीडिएट लंच के बाद ही आ जाएगा, कहीं ना कहीं आ जाएगा. एक्चुअली टेक्स अबाउट 3 to 4 सेशंस पूरे कवर करने के लिए. बट जो आप कह रहे हैं वो शायद लंच के बाद आएगा सेशन. लंच के बाद वो सेशन
बड़े बेसिक है.
पक्का आएगा वो सेशन.
सर एक और डाउट है.
हाँ.
Like I want to Delhi gym some time back.
You have gone to?
Delhi gym खाना.
अच्छा.
So now there जो मैंने बाहर से कुछ सामान लिया था,
हाँ.
so he charged me